5, 4,
3,
2,
1.
What's happening, everybody? Paulie here on the Latino Slant. Thank you for checking us out. This is your first time here on the channel. Lots of stuff that we cover, from Latino entertainment to pop culture and social issues as well. So before we start with this video, make sure you are subscribed. Please consider becoming a member. Also, too, before we start, I want to give a huge shout out to Jay Drunk 3PO for really featuring me on his video on the whole Latinx phenomenon and the media and all the current issues. Jay, thanks a lot. That was a great talk we had, and I really appreciate you and your community along with Mexican Iron Man. Now, in this video, what I want to do is I'm going to use my Chicano Studies minor degree, and I want to do some abbreviated history and then talk about what's going on, because really the pushback, what I've never seen before, is the agreement of 97% of US Latinos, which is 60 million, over 60 million people, according to Pew Research and the US Census of 2020, that they don't use the term. They do not use the term. Now, that's there. That's a fact. But what really is an amazing angle, an aspect of all of this, is the upheaval it's creating, because forever we never knew what to call ourselves. All of us, Spanish speaking, Afro, Latino, indigenous, Mesoamerican people. We didn't have a name for ourselves, which was fine. We were just, Mexicans from this part of the land, or Puerto Ricans from the island, or Cubans. So this is really interesting. Okay, let's give you an abbreviated history, because I want to go over the origins of Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, and then we'll come up to our current times. Sounds good? Great. Now, really, the term Spanish people have been used since this country was founded. There have been people of Spanish origin, Spanish country origins, that have fought in every major war, from the Civil War to the most current wars. Point being is that we've always been here. We've just been called Spanish, or Spanish-speaking people, which also, too, because the dominant culture called us that, the derogatory terms soon followed, and that's a whole nother video. We won't go into that. So what you have also, too, especially after the mid-1800s, after the Mexican-American War, you had a Texas to West Coast population, and you had the East Coast population. The East Coast was mainly populated by Caribbean, Cuban, Puerto Rican. Here, Mexican-American, later on Chicano. But it really wasn't until the Mexican Revolution that a population really jumped in the 1910s, the 1920s. And that generation, that first-born generation of Mexicans, were resistant. Kind of like, think of the punks of the 70s and 80s rebelling against their parents on traditional names, fashion, and kind of the old world. We're American and call themselves Mexican Americans, then later Chicano. Now, at the same time, the East Coast, you had the Puerto Rican in New York, in the major urban areas, calling themselves Boricuas, New Yorkers. But this whole time, the dominant culture was calling us Spanish speaking, which really is a half truth, right? Because unless we are from Spain, pure blood, Spanish blood, we're not just Spanish speaking people. And now, as you know, generation after generation, we speak Spanish less. That's just part of the lack of better words, the acculturation of being an American. So there was there was never really a need to call us anything up until the 60s and 70s, when you had the Chicano movement, where disenfranchised rural to urban Latinos in the Southwest started calling themselves Chicanos, and kind of going after the zoot suit method of becoming rebellious against the bigger oppressive culture. So the Puerto Ricans started doing it as well in places like Chicago and New York. Again, this is an abbreviated history. I'm giving you the major Cliff Notes highlights. It wasn't until the 70s where really it was the census and the U.S. government and the Nixon administration where they grabbed the term Hispanic, because they wanted to call us out, call us all one thing, so they can count us. And there's certain benefits by being counted, right? From voting to equal, to housing opportunities, etc. It wasn't until the first census it wasn't until 1980 that they even asked if you were Mexican American. Now, there was initially a big pushback on Hispanic because no one wanted to be part of the, a lot of people wanted, and it still continues, this resistance of being connected to your indigenous self, your Mesoamerican or Afro-Latino self, your African roots, and not just the Spanish side. So you got to understand, we had two European languages that were upon us, Spanish and English, not our indigenous languages, African languages. Okay, so there was still some resistance against Hispanic. I remember in the 80s. In the 90s, Latino started coming around. And it's not, don't get confused, guys. It's not Latin like Italian, Romanian, French. They're using Latino as a U.S. phenomenon, as a U.S. phenomenon, what to call ourselves. And it seemed a little more acceptable, and it caught on. Now, I will say at the same time, in my small time, in the movement and in really kind of shaping my own Chicanismo, that even then they were playing with words. Certain sects were like, well, we want to include everyone. Let's call ourselves Chicano-a, Latino-a. I don't think that really caught on, but Latin did. And Latin was more like Latin American, where not only were there was gendered conjugations, but also too there was a non one, Latin or Latin. So that really became the U.S. Latinos, and then also Hispanics really kind of caught on for the next, I would say, like 20-25 years. But even then, Chicano, Boricua, New Yorican, Latino, those were from the community. Spanish, Hispanic were never from. They took the word Hispanic from Hispano, the Hispanic Iberian Peninsula, Hispanoamerica, which was, the New World. That's where they created Hispanic. So you can even say Hispanic is not a real word. It's not a real Spanish word, because it's not. So there's that. But the history of who we are has always been a phenomenon. Like, what do we call myself as a Chicano here in the Southwest, how do I connect with a Spanish speaker Boricua in New York, a Cubano in Miami? Well, there you have it. Latino worked, and it still works. Now, we've been chugging along, and in academia, there were already uses of Latinx in the early aughts in, I want to say, either seminars or teachings, or even some essays and stuff of that nature. It wasn't until the massacre of the Pulse nightclub, I believe it's 2015, 2016, forgive me, that the media used Latinx because they wanted to connect it to gay Latinos that were murdered, that were killed. And this caught on in the LGBT community, which I think is fantastic. I think it makes sense for them, as Chicano made sense for me, as Boricua makes sense for, and we're talking millions. We're talking millions. So now there's this full court press with the media, Hollywood, actors, writers, directors who are Latino that use Latinx. It is what it is. Why? I do not know. But I'm just telling you. And why there's such a strong reaction every time you see something posted, whether it is from a corporate poster or ad using Latinx, anything that has to do with that, you'll see such a strong reaction in the comments, because 95, 97%, maybe we even say 96 now, they don't want that term, or they don't use it. Whether they understand it or not, that's a different story. So you're seeing the strong pushback because we've decided as a community, communities, groups of different people, what we all call ourselves long ago. So this thorn in our side, continues to be one. And I understand why Latinos in Hollywood who are trying to make it, trying to, create their careers and keep them and flourish, why they use Latinx. Because it's a rallying call, that one term that they can call themselves. It's also very marketable for Hollywood. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. Now, if you look at the Black and the African American experience in entertainment, they have such a rich, long history that once they unified in the 80s and 90s, some of the greatest films of I would say the last 20 years have been from our African American Black. So it's really an interesting phenomenon. I wanted to just give you a real brief Cliff Notes history on some of these names. And I am talking of U.S. Latinos. When you start going outside and dealing with, people from different countries, from Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, Venezuela, Central America, they all call themselves by the country that they're from, Hondureño, and so forth. But I think they recognize that when they're dealing with us, the U.S. Latinos, that Latino or Hispanic is really the connective tissue, and that the Spanish language is the connective tissue, because we all don't have an African history. We all don't have an indigenous history. We're all indigenous to certain parts of the world, as far as that main mestizo, and there's even a Mexica, contingent to this. People who just want to be called by their tribal names, which I understand as well. So that is the real issue still facing the Latino community here in the U.S., over 60 million strong, that we have problems still of what to call ourselves. I think we don't, but Latinx certainly puts the spotlight back on. Okay, again, I hope you like this video. Please, if you do, share it, like it, make sure you are subscribed. We'll see you very soon. And what we say here is, wherever you're at, keep your slant muy fuerte. Paz.
Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Slant.
Yeah, but isn't this the unplugged version? I don't know. I think it's the unplugged version. All right, Paulie, let's go. All right, listen, y'all. Just go ahead and let the guest play. Come on, jeez. That's better.